this is Pastor Stephen Anderson from Faithful Word Baptist Church in Tempe, Arizona. Today I want to talk about Genesis chapter 10, verses 2 through 5, where the Bible reads, "The sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Meshach and Tiras, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, and Riphath and Togarmah, and the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, in their nations." Now, the reason that I read those scriptures to you is that they clearly state that Ashkenaz is one of the Gentile nations. Now, 80 to 85% of today's so-called Jewry, those who claim to be Jews in the world today, 80 to 85% of them are what is known as Ashkenazi Jews. And an Ashkenazi Jew is so named because he primarily descends from this guy in the Bible named Ashkenaz, which is clearly listed as one of the Gentile nations. Now, the reason for this is that there was a nation of people who were of Japheth, who were Europeans, white people, known as the Khazars. And in the 8th century after Christ, the whole nation of the Khazars turned unto Judaism. They converted to the religion of Judaism. And for a few hundred years, the empire of the Khazars was a power in Eastern Europe, and they followed the religion of Judaism. But eventually they were defeated by the Russians, and they were scattered into Eastern Europe. And so a lot of the Eastern European Jews today are the descendants of the Khazars. And in fact, DNA testing has even confirmed that the Ashkenazi Jews have about 80% of their genetics and 80% of their ancestry from Europeans. So today's so-called Jews, the Ashkenazis, which again, like I said, is 80 to 85% of so-called Jews in the world today, and it is the primary type of Jew that immigrated into the nation of Israel and Palestine. And it is also the primary type of Jew that is living in the United States today, by far. So these Ashkenazi Jews, according to the Bible, are actually Gentiles. And I'm not the one calling them Ashkenazi Jews. They'll even call themselves Ashkenazi Jews. You could even just go to Wikipedia and just type in Ashkenazi Jews, and it will explain these things to you. You can talk to a rabbi, and you can talk to whoever you want, and you'll find out that these Ashkenazi Jews are the descendants of converts. A lot of Christian Zionists today, they claim that these Jews are God's chosen people because of the fact that they descend from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But in reality, they don't descend from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob any more than you or I do. Okay? They have some blood mixed in from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob from intermarrying with other Jews, but so do the rest of us Europeans. Primarily, they are white Europeans. They are not Middle Eastern Jews. And that's why when you look at those in Hollywood today that are so-called Jews, they don't look like Middle Eastern people. They look like white people because they are the descendants of white converts to Judaism, Caucasian converts, Khazars. That's why they're called Ashkenazi, because they're of Japheth. They're primarily descended from the Gentiles.
But it says here in this website, it's called thescientist.com, exploring life, inspiring innovation. And it says here, genetic roots of the Ashkenazi Jews. Most Ashkenazi Jews traditionally believed to have descended from the ancient tribes of Israel, may in fact be maternally descended from prehistoric Europeans. All right, they're actually Europeans. The majority of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from the prehistoric European women, according to a study published Tuesday, October 8th in Nature Communications. While the Jewish religion began in the Near East and the Ashkenazi Jews were believed to have origins in the early indigenous tribes of this region, new evidence from mitochondrial DNA, which is passed on exclusively from mother to child, suggests that female ancestors of most modern Ashkenazi Jews converted to Judaism in the North Mediterranean around 2,000 years ago, and later in West and Central Europe. All right, again, what? Converted. So that in this other website says Frontiers in Genetics, the Origins of Ashkenazi Jews in Yiddish. All right, and right here it says historical meaning of Ashkenaz is Ashkenaz is one of the most disputed biblical place names. It appears in the Hebrew Bible as the name of one of Noah's descendants, All right, that's what the guy was talking about earlier through Japhet, right? One of his sons, as a reference to the kingdom of Ashkenaz, prophesied to be called together with Ararat and Minai to wage war against Babylon. Jeremiah 51:27, in addition to tracing Ashkenazi Jews to the ancient Iranian lands of Ashkenaz and uncovering the villages whose names may derive from Ashkenaz, the partial Iranian origin of Ashkenazi Jews inferred by Das et al. In 2006 was further supported by genetic similarity of Ashkenazi Jews to Sephardic Mountain Jews and Iranian Jews, as well as their similarity to Near Eastern populations and simulated native Turkish and Caucasus populations, the Khazars, right? There are good grounds, therefore, for inferring that Jews who consider themselves Ashkenazic adopted this name and spoke of their lands as Ashkenaz, since they perceived themselves as Iranian origin, that we find varied evidence of the knowledge of Iranian language among Moroccan and Andalusian Jews and Karaites. You hear this? It's a big confederacy here. Andalusians, what are you talking about? Huh? Thought that was a Moorish town. Alright? Karaites. And to the 11th century's compelling point of reference to assess the shared Iranian origins of Sephardic and Ashkenazic Jews. Moreover, Iranian-speaking Jews in the Caucasus, the so-called Juhudis, and Turkic-speaking Jews in the Crimea prior to World War II called themselves Ashkenazism. Nazism. The Rhineland hypothesis cannot explain why a name that denotes Scythians and was associated with the Near East becomes associated with German lands in the 11th to 13th century. Uproot suggested that Jewish immigrants in Europe transferred biblical names onto the regions in which they settled. This is unconvincing. Biblical names were used as place names only when they had similar sound. Not only Germany and Ashkenaz do not share similar sounds, but Germany was already named Germana or Germanja in the Iranian Babylonian Talmud, completed in the 5th century AD, and not surprisingly was associated with Noah's grandson Gomer. Talmud Joma, alright? Noah's grandson Gomer. Gomer from Gomer. Alright, you hear this? That's Japhet again. Alright, Talmud Joma. Continues as the genetic structure of Ashkenazic Jews. Ashkenazi Jews were localized to modern-day Turkey and found to be genetically closest to Turkic, Southern Caucasian, and Iranian populations, suggesting a common origin in Iranian Ashkenaz lands, descendants of Ashkenaz in the lands of Ashkenaz. These findings were more compatible with an Irano-Turco-Slavic origin for Ashkenazi Jews and a Slavic origin for Yiddish than with the Rhineland hypothesis. So this is the original. They say, oh, we were just German. You know, that's what it means. Ashkenaz means German. Right, but actually it's Turkic and, Caucasian, and, it has a lot of Slavic relations as well. All those areas up there in between, almost getting to the Middle East, but actually in Europe still. Eastern Europe, they call. The findings have also highlighted the strong social, cultural, and genetic bonds of Ashkenazic and Iranian Judaism and their shared Iranian origins. Alright, so now I'm in myjewishlearning.com. It says, who are the Ashkenazi Jews? Alright, now it's important what we just read. You know how they translate the Reinhardt hypothesis means that they just came from Germany and that's it. They had no relation to Iranians or Turkish people or Caucasian people, none of that, right? Because they, they want to be linked to ancient Hebrew. So going with the whole Turkic and Iranian thing, it doesn't link them to that. So here it says Ashkenazi Jews are the Jewish ethnic identity most readily recognized by North Americans. All right, so most of the Jews in North America are what? Ashkenazi Jews. The culture of matzah balls, black-hatted Hasidim in Yiddish, the ethnicity originated in medieval Germany. Although strictly speaking, all right, so now this is what the story goes, right? That originated in Germany, but we just debunked that, right, through genetics. We just saw the two other websites, right? Although strictly speaking, Ashkenazism refers to Jews of Germany, the term has come to refer more broadly Jews from Central and Eastern Europe. All right, it has come. They're learning. There's new information coming out. You can't control the information. All right, genetics is telling people, and there's more information to tell you that it's actually more broadly to Jews from Central and Eastern Europe. Jews first reached the interior of Europe by following trade routes along waterways during the 8th and 9th centuries. Eventually, the vast majority of Ashkenazi Jews relocated to the Polish Commonwealth, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Ukraine, and Belarus. All right, we got that already too, where princes welcomed their skilled and educated workforce. The small pre-existing Polish Jewish communities' customs were displaced by the Ashkenazic prayer, order, customs, and Yiddish language. All right. We're in the Encyclopedia Britannica. We're telling us that the Ashkenazi people, says today, Ashkenazism constitute more than 80% of all Jews in the world. All right. Now remember what they told us in the Almanac, that just because you're a Jew doesn't mean you're the ancient Israelite. It's not synonymous. All right. Remember that. Vastly outnumbered Sephardic Jews. In the early 21st century, Ashkenazic Jews numbered about 11 million. In Israel, the numbers of Ashkenazism and Sephardim are roughly equal, and the chief rabbinate has both as Ashkenazic and a Sephardic chief rabbi on equal footing. All Reform and conservative Jewish congregations belong to the Ashkenazic tradition. All right. All right, I'm in the Zondervan Pictorial Bible Dictionary by Merrill C. Tini. All right, this is the official one in the 60s. All right, we're going to go to page 76. Well, around page 76, let me see. All right, so actually page 77 of this book, and it says Ashkenaz, right? Ashkenaz, great-grandson of Noah through Japhet and Gomer. All right? And this is the Bible verses. It says a tribe or nation mentioned once in Jeremiah 51:27, associated with the Ararat and Mini as an instrument of wrath in the hands of God against Babylon. They fought for the Most High, you know. And so again, a tribe or a nation, a nation. He has a nation, Ashkenaz. All right, he had a nation. Where's their descendants? And we're under Japhet now. All right, it says God will enlarge. That's what it means. It says a son of Noah. He was older than Shem, but comes third in some list of the three sons. Shem, however, is usually named first. Japhet and his wife were saved in the ark. He aided Shem in covering the naked body of their drunken father. He is the progenitor of the more remote northern peoples of southeastern Europe. All right, ancestor what? Of who? Southeastern Europe's, right? Ashkenazi Jews, these Khazars, all these Turks, right? Mongols. That he was to occupy the tents of Shem is thought to refer to conquest of the Greeks, who were descendants of Japhet. All right, the Greeks are descendants of Japhet. All right, Greeks, you know the Greeks are black, right? We saw Medicine Man's video. The ancient Greeks were black. All right, so even Japhet was black. Wasn't always about white. All right, this he did during the days of Assyrian power. He had 7 sons, whose descendants occupied the isles of the Gentiles, Hellenes or Greeks, an area including Asia Minor and Upper Greece. All right, that's Japhet right there. The Student's Manual of Oriental History, a manual of the ancient history of the East to the commencement of the Median Wars, by Francois Lenormand, librarian of the Institut de France, and E. Chevalier, member of the Royal Asiatic Society of London. Volume 1, comprising the history of the Israelites, Egyptians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. New edition. All right. And again, ancient history of the East. All right. Royal Asiatic Society. These are scholars. These are not people being religious, just religious. You know, they understand that a lot of that history in the scriptures is actual history. It's put in there maybe allegorically sometimes or as a story, but there's actual truth behind it, you know, that we have to research on. So we're going to start on page 60 of this book, The Race of Japhet. The sustained topic, it says that the name of this youngest born of the sons of Noah signifies extension, because that his posterity was to occupy an immense extent of country. His family remained longest united and was the last to leave the neighborhood of the place where Noah had fixed his residence after the deluge. The book of Genesis gives the names of his 7 sons as Gomer, Magog, Madai, Tubal, Meshech, Tiras, and Javan. Gomer personifies the family originally established on the northern coast of the Euxine in the north of Greece. Remember, the Euxine is the Black Sea. Remember, they were saying that the Cimmerians, and the Herodotus were saying the Cimmerians were from the upper, right, northern part of the Euxine, same as Gomer and his people, as it says here, in north of Greece. But in reality, they're from that whole area, Georgia and everything. So it says, from these were in due course of time to spring a people well known to the Greeks and Roman historians as Cimmerians. All right, Cimmerians, Kimbri or Kimri. All right, the Cimmerians are from Gomer, Gomer, Cimmerians. We're talking about real people. All right, who were for ages the terror of Asia and Europe, and who even made Rome tremble at the summit of her power. 3 sons of Gomer are mentioned: Ashkenaz, whose name seems composed of Gothic roots, as Kunis, a race of asses. Hey, I didn't say it. And which represents the Germanic and Scandinavian nations not yet separated and inhabiting a limited district to the northeast of the Black Sea. All right, Germanic and Scandinavian, the Germanic people, the Scandinavian people, Ashkenaz, who are all related to Gomer's kids. All right, Cimmerians, they're all the same. Ashkenaz, they're just cousins. Britpath as another son, that is the group of Celts or Gauls. All right, the Celts, the Celts, or the Gauls, the Galatians, the Gauls, then established, or the Franks, then established in the first European settlement on the Rifine Mountain, the present Carpathians, before entering on their last migration towards the France of our days. I told you these are the Franks, the Gauls. And lastly, Togarmah, in whom tradition has always recognized the Armenians. All right, these are the family or posterity of Gomer. Now, I guess he's going to get into the Magog, his son, and who's his nations. It says this represents a group of nations more extensive than others, and a very peculiar physiognomy. We speak of Magog. This name is sacred scripture, is almost always associated with Gog. The very frequent allusions in the Hebrew prophets to the incursions and ravages of the sons of Gog and Magog induce us to recognize them as the nomadic tribes of the northeast near the Caspian Sea. Their name has been compared to that of the Massagetha. The historian Josephus, the recorder of traditions of the Jewish nation, calls them Scythians, right? They're Scythians. Everything seems to prove that the inspired writer of the book of Genesis, under the name of Magog, intended to represent the numerous tribes composing the secondary race now designated by science Turanians, all right? By science, not just biblical scripture, by science. Same people. This race was one of the largest both numerically and with regard to the extent of territory which it occupies. Is divided into 2 great branches: the Ugro-Finnish and the Dravidian. The Finnish, Finland, right? Finnish, the Ugro-Finnish and the Dravidian. The first must be again subdivided into the Turkish, including the populations of Turkestan, right? Turkish people come out of this, and the steppes of Central Asia, as well as the Hungarians or the Huns, the Hungarians, right? Who have been for a long time settled in Europe, and the Uralo-Finnish group comprising the Finns, the Estonians, the Tushudis, and in general nearly all the tribes of the north of Europe and Asia. Again, all these cold places, right? All these descendants of Japhet, right? Japhet. The country of the Dravidian branch is on the contrary to the south. This branch is in fact composed of the indigenous people of the peninsula of Hindustan, Tamuls, Telingas, Karnats, who were subjugated by the Aryan race and who appear to have originally driven before them the Negroes of the Australian group, the original inhabitants of the soil, who are now represented by the almost savage tribe of the Khons. The Encyclopedia Metropolitana, or System of Universal Knowledge, on a methodical plan projected by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. All right, chronological tables from AM 1 to AD 1500. All right. Chronological tables comprehending the chronology and history of the world from the earliest records to the close of the Russian War. First division, ancient and medieval history from AM to 1500. All right, London and Glasgow is from 1857. All right, an encyclopedia. Encyclopedia, right? The sons of Japhet, Spain, France, Greece, Germany, Asia Minor, Circassia, and Europe in general. Continue real quick in the book. Asia Minor starts talking about, the nations there. The people of Lesser Phrygia or Trojans were also without doubt a very ancient people, but of certain origin. Both are supposed that Ashkenaz, the eldest son of Gomer, first settled this district. It says the northern and German nations. I skipped a lot, but I just want to show you things that relate to what we're talking about. It says in this division of chronology, we have recorded the dates and the most remarkable of those barbaric inundations, which from the time swept over the fairest and most civilized portions of the east and west. Though the invading tribes were known by different names, yet as they all, or nearly all, proceeded from a common source, same people, same family, and as their historic importance taken singly extends over but a comparatively brief period, the necessity and propriety of including them under one general appellation and one chronological category will at once be evident. These barbaric tribes, remember Conan the Barbarian, these barbarous tribes, Barbary tribes were known as Scythians, Tartars, the Gati, the Masagati, the Sarmatians or Samaritans or Sarmatians, Cimmerians, all right, the Cimmerians, here we go, Teutones, Ubi, the Helvetians, the Gauls, the Goths, the Celts and the Huns, the Germans, Sclavonians, the Scandinavians, the Cherusci, the Chatti, the Alemanni or the Heruli, the Burgundians, the Marcomanni, the Suavi, the Quadi, the Alani, the Hermunduri, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, all right, etc. All right, all those people come from a common source. Remember, these are from Gomer. These are from Gomer or Magog, Gomer. All right, now I wanted to get into this book, and I thought it was a really good find. And it's called The Royal Genealogies of the Genealogical Tables of Emperors, Kings, and Princes from Adam to the times in two parts. Part 1 begins with a chronological history of the world, from the beginning of time to the Christian era, and then the genealogies of the earliest great families and most ancient sovereigns of Asia, Europe, Africa, and America down to Charlemagne, and many of them down to these times. Part 2 begins with the Grand Revolution of Charlemagne and carries on to the royal princely genealogies of Europe down to these times, concluding with those of the Britannic Isles. All right, this is by James Anderson DD from London, printed by the author by James Benham. Now, very important, what I want you to see is this, the year that this was printed. All right, it says, to the most high Posan and most illustrious prince, Frederick Louis, Prince of Great Britain. So this is written for this person, Prince of Wales, Prince of Stewart of Scotland, a Stewart of Scotland, Duke of Cornwall, Rothesay, and Edinburgh. All right, so you get it. They're going to make sure they try to be as accurate as possible. They're tracing this person's genealogy, basically. And I know you think it's all biblical and religion, but we're not talking about that. All right? Book from 1632. All right? Written to that prince. It wasn't written for you. They didn't know eventually we were going to read this. But let's see what it says here.
All right, so remember this book is written for the Prince of Britain. This is from 1632. All right, they ain't trying to be no agenda here, trying to be biblical. This is what they knew how to do. This is very, in its time, a primary source. All right, so it says here, Table 2, the patriarchs after the flood of the line of Japhet. We're going to read a little bit about the descendants of Japhet and his line and the nations that came out of him. We're going to start out here with Gomer again. And now it says here, Gomer, from whom are descended the Cimmerians or Cimmerians. Here we go. We're going back to the people we've been studying, right? And the same book from 1632 letting us know that the Cimmerians, it is not no enigma. They're not a mystery. They come out of Gomer. All right, so the Cimmerians, Cimbri, it's like the Celts. We'll see that later, Danish. All right, from whom the descend Gomer, the Cimmerians, the Phrygians, we saw the map earlier, again, that's modern-day Turkey, the Phrygians and other nations of Lesser Asia, who sent their colonies afterwards into the north and west, from whom the Gauls, all right, the Gauls or the Franks come out of them, or some of the Gauls descend, for they were of various sorts. So the Gauls were mixed, though, not just Gomer. All right, so it says Magog, the father of the Getes and Masagetes on the sides of the north, Great Asia, from whom came the Asiatic Scythians at or near Mount Caucasus, or Caucasus, right? Or as in the Hebrew, Gog, Halam or Haran, and from these came the European Scythians and the Goths. All right, so it says Ashkenaz, father of the Ashkenians, or first inhabitants of Pontus and Bithynia, toward the Oxium Sea or the Black Sea, and also of the country in and about the Ilium or Troy. The Black Sea is by Sony called Axiom from Ashkenaz. The German nation is supposed to spring from a colony of Ashkenaz, the Germans. Remember what modern day Jews, Ashkenaz, German, Ukrainian, Khazars, you know. And what does it say here? It says some of these are names in the dual or plural number, which are supposed to therefore to be rather the names of nations than of particular men. All right, so you don't want to see it like that, like, oh, everybody came out of 3 people. Well, they're probably representing nations, not just one person. All right, letting you know here. But that hinders not there being descendants from Japhet. So even though at some point they still came out of Japhet, or this person who, you know, originally, you know, there is a beginning to everything. All right, you know. And by these were the isles of the Gentiles. These are the Gentiles. These are the islands of the Gentiles, or the Europeans. Remember, this book is from 1632. They're letting you know, right, where these nations are from. It says here, the most ancient kings of Germans. It says Noah, Japhet. See how it starts? Noah, Japhet. It says Gomer, from whom came those Germans called Combri or Cimbri, right? This is the same as Cimmerians, Cimbri, right? Ashkenaz or Ashkenaz, called by Aventinus to Isco, the giant, and by others, Luiso, whom Aventinus makes fourth son of Noah, the fourth son of Noah, and that he was born after the flood, but without authority, was sent by Noah into Europe after the flood 131 years and 20 captains, and made a settlement near the Tanais on the west coast of the Oxen Sea, that's the Black Sea, by some called Ashken, from him, right? Ashkenaz, that's where he settled, and there founded the kingdom of the Germans and Sarmatans or Sarmatians, Samaritans. But by computing the years of the reigns of these kings to the death of Wolfram Stickinger, the 20th king, says here, when Ashkenaz himself was above 24 years old, for he lived above 200 years and reigned, right? It says there. In the vocables of Saxony and Hessia, there are some vestiges of the name Ashkenaz, and from him the Jews called the Germans Ashkenaz. But in Saxonic and Italian, they are called Luisones or Tuisones, from Tuisco, his other name, all right? In the 25th year of the reign, he partitioned his kingdom into triparchies and governments, and brought colonies from diverse parts to increase it. He built the city Duisburg, made a body of laws in Verdi, and invented letters, which Cadmus afterwards imitated, for the Greeks and High Dutch are much like in many words. All right, they're talking about Ashkenaz, a son of Gomer. All right, these are the people who the Germans came from, or the Combri, Cimbri, the Cimmerians. All right, it's the same thing. We'll see that later. It says Ashkenaz had a brother called Sitta, say the Germans, the father of the Scythians, for which the Germans have been of old called Scythians too, very justly, because they came mostly from old Scythia. And Germany had several ancient names, for that part next to the Euxine, that's the Black Sea, was called Scythia, and the country of the Getes, but the parts east of the Vistula or Wesel were called Samartia, Europe, and westward it was called Gallia. Celtica, all right, Celts, the Gauls, Gallians, Galatians, Alemania, Aleman, the Germans, in Spanish you say Aleman, Francia, or the Franks, and Teutonia. For old Germany comprehended the far greater part of Europe, and those called Gauls were all old Germans, all right, who by ancient authors are called Celts, Gauls, and Galatians, all right, which is confirmed by the historian Strabo and Aventinus, and by Aestedius in his chronology, page 201, or
It says Ashkenaz or Tuisko, after his death, was worshipped as the ambassador and interpreter of the gods, and from thence called the first Germans Mercury, from Twisten to interpret Mercury. Mercury, who's Mercury? That's Hermes, aka Thoth. Alright, so it gets pretty detailed on the German people and the nations that came out of these main, Goths, Ashkenaz, Scythians. So it goes very deep. You see, as you can see here. Continue. Look at the table; it's really long.
All right, so now I wanted to come to this book, which is basically a Bible. It's a controversial Bible. They took it out of circulation, but it's the one right before the official King James version that we have today. This is actually before that. This is the 1611 King James version, which was taken out of circulation. This is the original scanned PDF, right? So, and you're probably like, oh, Kurimeo, why are you reading the Bible? And there's nothing wrong with reading the Bible. But in this case, I'm not going to be reading verses. I'm going to just show the genealogical chart that is in this Bible. All right, so we all know the story, right? God and then Adam and Eve, right? The first humans. So they had Seth. Seth comes out of these people. And you see Cain had his own line, right? Cain got banished, but he had his own line, right? And remember, we saw my Thoth videos. There was two Enochs. So Cain's first son is Enoch, and then we got the other Enoch, right? The biblical one, right? But we don't know which one they're talking about. So which one are they always talking about? So either way, what I wanted to show is Noah's right here in the bottom. You see Noah and his three sons, Japhet, Shem, and Ham. We've been talking about Japhet, right? Now I know maybe this is not to be taken literal. Maybe it's symbolic, and maybe these people represent nations, right? Not just a specific person, right? But either way, what we've been learning, right? With Japhet, here it goes right here. So this is the line of Japhet. Let me just zoom in real quick. So this is the line of Japhet. And remember, he had Gomer, Magog, Madai, Tubal, Iun, Meshech, Tidas. We went over the nations. We're going to go some more again. What comes out of these people? Again, Gomer, Ashkenaz. You see? Ashkenaz, Ritpath, Togarmah. And he had other kids, Cimmeri, remember? So out of Madai comes the Medes, right? And then you got King Darius from the Medes, right? Famous. And then you got Ion's kids, which became Greeks, the Kittim, Dodanim, the Tarshish, the Elisha. These all became Greek nations. All right, and then it goes into this family tree here. Look at that, Asia, Europe, and Africa. They got split, they went both ways, Japhet's line. All right, so real quick, just want to go back to this dictionary. It says an archaic dictionary, biographical, historical, and mythological, from the Egyptian, Assyrian, and Etruscan monuments and papyri, from the archaeological evidence, right? Primary sources from archaeological artifacts, papyri monuments, all right, by W.R. Cooper Frass, all right, Secretary to the Society of Biblical Archaeology. This was from 1876. I just want to read here some descriptions of Japhetic people, just so you can see this is more than just Bibles. This is actual. This book has nothing to do with the Bible. So it says here, Amhotep III, too, being also great hunter, chiefly of lions. In one of those expeditions, he became acquainted with a tribe of Japhetic borderers, right? Japhetic, the daughter of a chief of whom a lady named Taia he afterward married. All right, so he married this Amenhotep, this Hamite Egyptian, right, or Mizraim, descendant of Mizraim maybe, all right, married a Japhetic princess from the tribe of Japhet. You see, they mixing, they're making confederations, alliances. It says Ariada, according to the consensus of Japhetic traditions, the name of the birthplace of mankind, Japhetic. All right, another one right here says Uia, an unknown chief of Japhetic people, whose daughter Taia became queen of Egypt by her marriage with King Amenhotep III. All right, Japhetic people marrying into the Egyptian royalty. She became queen of Egypt. Who? A Japhetic person, most likely a Cimmerian princess. Cimmerian. All right, so Japhetos. Now one more example says here Japhetos. Who's Japhetos? According to the Greeks, one of the three sons of Sisustrus,
Servao. Just want to go here real quick. Read this real quick. Japhetos comes up here, says servant. Who is servant? Servant, another name for Chronos, okay? Chronos, servant. This is according to the Grecian mythology, is one of the three sons of Sisustrus, right? So here's the other one, right? Remember, we just got a Japhetos. He made war upon his brothers, Titan and Japhetos. So there's three of them, right? In order that his own children might reign over the world. But his sister Astilik made peace between them. He has been compared with the patriarch Shem of Hebrew history. Been reading about Shem, right? Shem and Japhet, Japhetos, and the other one was the other one, Ham or Titan, the giant Titan Ham, Hamites. We know Canaanites were giants. Hey man, I'm just correlating all the stuff we're reading and learning. The servant again was Chronos. This is the same story of Noah and his three sons in Greek mythology. It's the same thing, Japhetos. They didn't even change the name of Japhet. It's just added the T-O-S at the end, Japhetos, Japhetos. Just like when they add Atlantli or Atlantla, they add the tis, Atlantis. They was always talking about America. That's just Greek words. Egypt is a Greek word as well. Egypt is a Greek word. And Nile is a Greek word. So just wanted you to see this and hope you understand that even if you go back in ancient history, they're always going to go back. Remember, we're reading, again, it's called an archaic dictionary, biographical, historical, and mythological from the Egyptian, Assyrian, Etruscan monuments and papyri, right from the artifacts. This is nothing to do with the Bible, right from the artifacts. All right, talking about Japhetic people, Japhetic and Shemite, Japhetic and Hamite. All right, this is more than just Bible stories, it's history. I'm going to get into this book real quick, Berosus and Genesis, Manetto and Exodus, Hellenistic Histories and the Date of the Pentateuch. This is by Russell Jimirkin, all right? Again, the sons of Japhet, Gomer, Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, Meshach, and Tiraz, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Repub, and Togarmah. So again, they go over all of their descendants. It says here, Gomer is universally recognized as Gimiri, Simbri. See the G? Turn it into a C, the Cimmerians, all right, of cuneiform sources. The Cimmerians of classical historians, all right, the Cimmerians. We got that already. It says here, the Cimmerians invaded Urartu in 714 BC. We got the story from the Assyrian clay tablets, right? The Cimmerians. So the Cimmerians invaded Phrygia and Sardis. All right, Sardis. Remember that. I keep saying Sardis. Sephardi. Sephardic. We're talking about Sephardic. All right, Saparda. Where is the real Saparda? Is right here, Sardis in Asia Minor. It wasn't over there in Spain. So these Cimmerians were over here involved with that people in Asia Minor. All right. And it keeps going. Ashkenaz, we already got him, right? The Scythians, in northern tribe like the Cimmerians, all right? Tubal and Meshach, that's his other, the Muski, Magog, his other son, we know him. And the Tamorga, you got Togarmah, Hittites, Tabal, right? Ritpath, which is another son of Gomer, the Cimmerians and Ashkenaz, the Scythians, it says here, you see same people. It says Tiraz cannot be identified with certainty. One might suggest identifies Tiraz with the Tusha, a sea people of the late 10th century. So they were naming the tribe of Dan a sea people too, and the Phoenicians, right? So it's all different kinds of sea people. But you know, it's all involved with these same people historically. We'll see what I'm talking about. Down here it says where Japhet's son Gomer is said to have three sons, Ashkenaz, Ritpath, and Togarmah, as Gomer is clearly from Gimiri. The first wave of horsemen to come down from the Caucasus, and Ashkenaz is clearly from the Assyrian Ashkuguzu. Ritpath, too many be supposed to be mounted people from the Caucasus. All right, these people had horses a lot, so they really coming from, like I was saying. You see, horses originated in America, North America, and they're camels and all that. We know that they eventually made it into Asia. So do you think they went this way through the Bering Strait, as they always try to tell us? Could they have, I mean, look, like if you see this land was all connected, kind of. You see the light blue part, that was all above water. So you can probably walk all across. I'm going to show you some other maps, is what I'm saying. So where were they getting their horses from, really? These people were in these northern parts of the world. All right, these Japhet type people, these Cimmerians. Again, in the Archaic Dictionary, biographical, historical, mythological, from the Egyptian, Assyrian, and Etruscan monuments and papyri, right from the archaeological evidence. We got Gimiri. We just got, that the Gomer is known as Gimiri. It says Cimmerians here. Cimmerians see the Gimiri. So let's go to Gimiri. Gimiri, right? A people who together with the Scythians ravaged Assyria, right? Who's Assyria? Ashur, the Semites. So the Japhet people, Scythians, ravaged Assyria and Media. At the downfall of the Syrian Empire, they were the Cimmerians of classic history. The Cimmerians, right? The same people, Cimmerians, right? G turns into C, Cimmeri, the Cimbri. They, what did they do? They mixed with the Danes over there in Denmark area and Jutland. All right, you follow me, right? Cimmerians, our Gomer. The book now is called The History of Egypt, Chaldea, Syria, Babylonia, and Assyria, by G. Maspero, Honorable Doctor of Civil Laws and Fellow of Queen's College, Oxford, member of the Institute and Professor at the College of France. This is Volume 8. It says containing over 1,200 colored plates and illustrations of Grolier society. Assyrian record says, we know, however, from other sources that the country in which he took refuge had for some time past been ravaged by enemies coming from the Caucasus, known to us as the Cimmerians. All right. Number 2. Previous to this period, these had been an almost mythical race. They're talking about the Cimmerians, right? Mythical race in the eyes of the civilized races of the Oriental world. They imagined them as living in a perpetual mist on the confines of the universe. On a perpetual mist, never does bright Helios look upon them with his rays, neither when he rises toward the starry heaven, nor when he turns back from heaven towards the earth, but a baleful night spread itself over these miserable mortals. All right, so it seems like they're always in darkness, like they don't have the sun. They're in this part of the world where there's a perpetual mist, like a baleful night spread itself over these miserable mortals. All right, it says footnote number 1. What does number 1 say? It says in the Odyssey, it is this passage which Euphoros applies to the Cimmerians of his own time who were established in the Crimea, in which, all right, Crimea, all right, where is that? The Crimea, right? Russia. Cimmerians or Cimmerians, Crimea or Cimmeria, and which counts for his sayings that they were a race of miners living perpetually underground. They lived underground. They never saw the sun. All right. So these Cimmerians are getting around. They are a part of history. All right. We're in this other website. I know I might be repeating myself, but I just bear with me just so you can understand who these people are and where they're coming from and what the roles they were playing in history, and early, at least in ancient history. We're in this website, ironicaonline.org or Iran, ICA-online.org. And it says here, the Cimmerians, a nomadic people, most likely of Iranian origin, who flourished in the 8th and 7th century BC. The name English form is ultimately derived from GK Kurimeo, with Cimmeri, all right, Cimmeri, and Assyrian and Babylonian sources. Various forms are found. Gomer, all right, Gomer, or Gimira, and so on, all right. And it gives you the sources. The Hebrew Bible, Genesis 10:2, Ezekiel 38 says has Gomer, Masoretic, or Gomer. All right, Gomer. Do you guys know who that is? Erroneously assimilated to Gomer, name of wife of Hosea. All right, in the Septuagint, the forms Gomer in Genesis and Gomer in Ezekiel are used. Josephus' Antiquities Judaica says Gomaros or Gomares, and the Vulgate has Gomer. All right, so who are we talking about? Gomer, Gomer. It is possible that the name was preserved in Arm, Garmic, referring to Cappadocia, south of the river Halys. It says origin. The first mention of the Cimmerians in Western sources is in the Odyssey of Homer, where they are described as inhabitants of the opposite side of the Oceanus River, surrounding the earth, a country forever deprived of sunshine. So their place of darkness. Remember, thus at the entrance to the kingdom of Hades, towards which Odysseus sails to obtain an oracle from the south of the seer Tiresias. The Western Greeks very early localized Odysseus' wanderings to the seas around Italy and Sicily, and placed the Cimmerians around Lake Avernus near Cumae in Campania. All right, but very interesting, right? They're from where? The opposite side of the ocean and rivers around the earth, a country forever deprived of sunshine, the Cimmerians. We're in this book now. It's called Who Were the Cimmerians? And where did they come from? Sargon II, the Cimmerians, and Rusa I by Anne Catherine Gade Christensen, translated from the Danish, Danish. Why does the Danish know about the Cimmerians? Alright, we're going to get into that later on. What is the Danish or the Danites, or a group of Danites mixing with Cimmerians? What do they have to do, right? Okay, we just gave you a little hint right there. So it says this is from the Historic Philosophy Meddelege, the Royal Danish Academy of Science and Letters. This is from 1988. In Greek tradition, as recorded by Herodotus, the original haunts of the Cimmerians was a question which seems to have presented no problem. According to this tradition, they were to be looked for north of the Black Sea and in the Crimea, right? Russia, Crimean area, Cimmerian, or Crimea, all right, Cimmerian, all right, and what was later known as Scythia. However, according to Herodotus, the Cimmerians were driven out of this territory by the Scythians and were forced to move southward along the coastline of the Black Sea and into Asia Minor, where in the 7th century BC, during the reign of Artis, king of the Lydians, they attacked and conquered Sardis. The discoveries made by Sir Henry Layard and other excavators in royal archives of Nineveh and Calah, first and foremost, the discovery of ancient Assyrian clay tablets yielded an entirely new source material for the study of the Cimmerians. So I understand what they're saying. These Cimmerians, you can find the history in the Assyrian clay tablets, historical archaeological artifacts the Assyrians wrote. From those times, they talk about the Cimmerians. A series of these tablets represent letters from the time of Sargon II. You can find the same history in the book of 2 Kings or Kings in the Bible, or 2 Samuel, I believe, referring to the Cimmerians and their country Gomer. Again, what? A series of these tablets of these. We're not talking about the Bible here. All right, a series of these Assyrian clay tablets. Who's the Assyrians? Understand, overstand, Assyrians. Assyrians are from Ashur, the son of Shem. Again, Shem. These are Semites, but not Hebrews, because Eber came after. Abraham came after. Eber and Abraham, who Hebrews come out of, came after. These Assyrians are not Hebrews. They're Semites because they're from Shem. Shemites or Semitic. There's a difference here. But even though, right, they're Shemites, they're Semites, they're from Shem, and they wrote about the Cimmerians, all right, in their clay tablets, and that their country is Gomer. This is not the Bible. Who sounds like that? Gomer, Gemer. All right, we're about to get into it. The Assyrians' letters show clearly that at the end of the 8th century BC, the Cimmerians were settled in an area not far from Ur, example, to the south and not to the north of the Caucasus. Not only are these letters several centuries earlier than the writings of the Greek historians, they also represent an infinite more reliable set of sources than that which we find in the learned traditions in Herodotus. We're talking about real clay tablets, real archaeology, real stories, real history. These people were real. We're not talking about fake Cimmerians with the S. You gotta understand, Cimmerians are just people that are dwelling in the town or ancient land of Sumer. It wasn't an actual people called the Cimmerians. These are the real Cimmerians. These are the real Cimmerians. They're hiding them in the timelines. Remember, it's an enigma, it's a problem, it's a mystery. They don't want you to know about them. So we continue in the Encyclopedia Iranica, Iranian encyclopedia, again, Cimmerians. Just want to read this part right here. It says, as the Cimmerians cannot be differentiated archaeologically from the Scythians, it is possible to speculate about their Iranian origins. In the Neo-Babylonian text, according to the Yakonov, including at least some of the Assyrian texts in Babylonian dialect, Gemiri, in similar forms designate the Scythians and Central Asian Saka. So these people, the Saka, are also the same people. Right? Are the Cimmerians, are the Scythians, same people coming from Gemiri, reflecting the perception among inhabitants of Mesopotamia that Cimmerians and Scythians represented a single cultural and economic group. Continuing here, it says Cimmerians in Transcaucasia in the Near East. According to intelligence reports sent to Assyrian King Sargon II between 720 and 714 BC, King Rusa I of Urartu marched his troops to Gamira, land of the Cimmerians. All right, they lived in Gamira, so the Cimmerians, but was defeated. Lanfranchi and Parapola. All right, they say a modern attempt at more precise dating of these events to August-September 714 is hardly convincing. Kurgamira was reliably localized by the Jakonov on the territory of modern Georgia. All right, most probably in its central part, in central Georgia. All right, so real quick, go into Google Maps and we see Georgia, right? Now, real quick, let me just zoom in. Look at that writing. All right, and look at their Moorish architecture, right? Another one, just real quick, another one, right? Moorish architecture. Another one, Georgia, Moorish architecture, right? Or not this one, right? No, not this ain't Moorish architecture. No, not this one, right? Well, another one, Moorish architecture. All right, so let's just go to the map real quick. So we see what's in Georgia. So Georgia, in central Georgia. What's in central Georgia? You got the mountains. These are the Caucasus Mountains. All right, so Georgia. We're not talking about Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, the original. We're talking about Georgia today, right? Georgia, all right, in between Armenia and what? Russia, right? Soviet Union, Ukraine over here, Kazakhstan over here, and this is all Russia right here, right? So it's like a pathway, a bridge into Asia, into another way into Turkey or the Black Sea, right? The Caspian Sea right here, Georgia. So the Cimmerians are from here. All right, so very important location in this time period. Remember, this is Anatolia, Asia Minor, Turkey. Over here is Greece. Then we got Iraq, Syria, the supposed Holy Land, right? The Middle East, and then Egypt, Africa, right? So a bridge, right, into this world, the Asian world, the South, the India and everything. Look, you can go to India from there. So a very important spot, right? Strategic location, right? Where the Cimmerians were living. Now remember this, all right? This is important so you can understand, have a clear perspective. Turkey, right? All right, we're in this book now. Let me just zoom in. It says The Khazars in Annotated Bibliography by Bernard D. Wainwright. This is in Studies in Bibliography and Book Lore, Volume 11, number 1 and 2. All right, from the Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion. All right. And this is the article we're going to read. It says, this bibliography is based on the same principles as its predecessor, which appeared more than a decade ago. The annotations of the items are designed to indicate similar angles, such as the beginning and destruction of the Khazar state, eventual continuation after the 10th century conversion, problems of migration westward, and the origin of Eastern European Jewry. But this time, the emphasis is also on several additional angles, such as the visibility or lack of it in Jewish sources of the connection between the Khazars and Judaism or Jews. The application of the history of the Khazars to today's political purposes and its combination with anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, or anti-Israeli tendencies. The first of these angles is already found in Josephus's genealogical table, 9th or 10th century, which depicts the Khazars as descendants of Togarmah, a grandson of Noah's son Japhet. All right, so let's go back to that table we had earlier. All right, so Togarmah, right? Togarmah right here. All right, Togarmah. The Khazars come out of this person, it says. Supposedly, the Khazars, Togarmah, from Gomer and Japhet. All right. Without mentioning that they, at least some of them, had any connection with Judaism. It is carried over into later centuries, for examples by two 12th century Jewish travelers, Benjamin of Tudela and Petachia of Risenberg. Bibliography, and as the number says, and Ishak Abramanel, commentary of Ezekiel, chapter 38, which by implication counts the Khazars among the people who will come with Gog to fight the Jews in the land of Israel and perish there. You see that? They will come with Gog. The Khazars, man, these Confederate. Who's the Khazars? See why they ain't mentioning the Khazars or want to be connected to these Khazars? All right. Among the people who will come with Gog to fight the Jews in the land of Israel and perish there. This, written in 1493, indicates that he regards the Khazars as anti-Jewish Gentiles. And then right here got a couple of sources. It says here by Marcus Nathan Adler, the itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela says the southern provinces of Russia were spoken of as the land of the Khazars, especially by Jewish writers long after the Russian conquest about the year 1000. And the Crimea was known to European travelers as Khazaria. All right. On this side it says Naji Aluj Al-Masira ila Palestine, says the journey to Palestine. 1964 says there were 10 million Jewish Khazars. Thus, the Jews of Eastern Europe, who were the most Zionistic, did not originate in the kingdom of Judah and were not Semites. It says here by Menachem Melander, Ben Solomon Halevi. All right, it says first edition Yiddish Amsterdam, 1741. Then it says new edition translation into Hebrew by Haim Homer Jerusalem in 1964. I don't remember the quoting sources here. It says Jehuda Halevi translated the Sefer HaKusari from the Khazar language. According to Arab authors, Khazar or Khazar, right, was the son of Japhet, or a descendant of Japhet, the son of Noah. Khazar separated from his brothers after they left the ark, and he came to the river Volga, building a large city there, which he called Al-Khazar. These people who lived on the north side of the Caspian Sea are also called Khazars, since they joined the Khazar nation. At first, the Khazar king leaned toward the Karaite form of Judaism until Rabbi Judah al-Nagari explained to him that this is not the real Judaism. He then converted to traditional Judaism, and according to the teachings of our rabbis, over 100,000 people converted to Judaism. You see that? They converts. All right. Now we got another source here. It says Baraz GM Dreineshiv Eritsko Kasaro Ruski. All right, he got a very long name. All right, the oldest Jewish Khazar Russian legal monument, the legal code for people in Sobrani Trudovpo Bopruso. All right, that's Russian. All right there again. It says collected works on the problem of the Jewish element in the monuments of old Russian literature, volume 1. This is from 1927, and it says, insofar as the Slavic nations, especially the Bulgars, were influenced by the Old Testament, it was through the Jewish Khazars. All right, Slavic nations, Jewish Khazars, the converts. The original legal code, which was enforced in Khazaria, consisted of the religio-civil code designed for the populace. All right, another source here says Julian Bartosiewicz, Studia Historicini y Literati, or Historical and Literary Studies, Volume 2, from 1881. All right, it says the Khazars were a people related to the Huns. All right, the Huns. The Khazar state was multi-tribal, speaking a language which resembled that of the Volga Bulgars. The religion of the top rulers was Judaism, to which they changed from Islam. From what? From Islam. From what? From Islam. All right, you see the relation? You see where the relation's going, right? Confederate, you see what's going on here, right? We're going to get deeper into this as the videos go. All right? All right, got another source here. It says Bashmakov, or Une solution nouvelle de problème des Khazars, Mercury de France. All right, pages 39 and 73 says the Khazars' racial origin and the geographic position of their capital seems to confirm the information given in King Joseph's letter. Gotta get into that. It says here John O. Betty, The Iron Curtain Over America, Dallas 1951, chapters 3 and 4, Russia and the Khazars joined the Democratic Party. It says the author maintains that communism is the creation of Judaized Khazars in Russia. The Marxian program of drastic controls, so repugnant to the free Western mind, was no obstacle to the acceptance by many Khazar Jews, for the Babylonian Talmud, under which they lived, had taught them to accept authoritarian dictation on everything from their immorality to their trade practices. He also states that persons of Khazar background or tradition, or of related origin or ideology, are in high positions and influence in the American Democratic Party and the United States government, and that they play leading roles in England and France. All right, it says here from Ishak Ben Sevi. All right, so from Tel Aviv from 1951. It says Jews came very early to the Crimea. where they organized agriculture and urban settlements and took over the commerce between the Slavs and the Khazars, upon both of whom they exerted some influence. But it was mainly the Persian Jews, again, who was these Persian Jews, who influenced the Khazar king, Bulan, and his top officials to convert to Judaism in 732 or 740. The military and civilian elite were the first to become Jews, and later others followed in their footsteps. In the 9th and the beginning of the 10th century, when the Khazars conquered the Crimea, the local Crimean Jews integrated into Khazar Jewry. At the beginning of the 11th century, the Khazar state was definitely defeated by the Russian princes, losing its oldest center on the River Don, but continuing to rule in Dagestan, northern Caucasus, and the Crimea. It has now become clear that something of the Jewish Khazar state existed up to the 13th century until the Mongol invasion. So-called Mongol, who's this? These hordes. The hordes, which is the Russian armies. Talking about Georgi, Genghis, aka Genghis. Okay, we got another source here. It says from Jivo Blätter 13 from 1938, pages 109 to 23. It says the native Crimean Jews, the Krimchaki and the Karaites, have different blood types than the Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews. Right? They're different. You see, the Karaites, they ain't the same as these Ashkenazi. Because we learned about the Karaites in Prester John, right? Alright, but they have a different blood type than the Ashkenazi and the Sephardic Jews. Their blood structure is close to that of the pure Turkic tribes from Japhet, right? And the Kyrgyz and the Uzbeks. This blood composition may possibly be connected with the Khazar origin. Alright, we got another source here from Mohammed Isat Darwaza. Says Tariq Bani Israeli min Asfarim, the history of the children of Israel from their books, volume 3, Cairo 1960. It says the Khazars were the largest group to convert to Judaism, and they are known as Ashkenazism. What? The Khazars are known as Ashkenazism? They converted to Judaism? Another source here says Max Diamant and Arthur Praise, Diasharin, I can't read that. Alright, and this is from the Judische Volkskunst by Max Diamant in 1937. It says, before the immigration of Jews from Germany, remnants of the Khazars who had converted to Judaism in their Asiatic abodes came to Poland. So before they got to Poland or Germany, alright, Jews from Germany, right? They didn't originate there. They didn't just go from the Holy Land to Germany. Alright, these were Khazars who converted to Judaism, alright, before they got there to Poland. Traces of their culture can be found in the Jewish art of Eastern Europe. Julil Jasen, Historia Evrekrikosko Narodo Rossi, the history of the Jewish people in Russia, volume 1. Alright, and it goes right here. It says the Khazars came from Asia into South Russian steppe, where they formed a number of urban settlements. In the 8th century, the Khazar king Kagan and his entourage embraced the Jewish religion. They embraced it, they converted. During the same century, they overpowered the Eastern Slavic tribes. A century later, they spread their rule over the whole territory between northern Caucasus and the Kiev region. By 964 or thereabouts, the Kiev prince defeated the Khazars, who soon disappeared. See, like I told you, they say they disappeared, but they actually went to Poland. There's a lot of different investigations, all right, that they actually settled in Poland. All right, like it says over here on this side, look, I didn't read this. Like Jewish settlements in Poland and Russia, all right? So they were around for about 300, 400 years. That's not a little bit. That was a lot. That was a big empire. They were controlling the trade and all that between Europe and Asia, all right? These Khazars. All right, so now we're in this book. It's called The 13th Tribe, The Khazar Empire and Its Heritage by Arthur Koestler, all right? Now it says, this book traces the history of the ancient Khazar Empire, a major but almost forgotten power in Eastern Europe, which in the Dark Ages became converted to Judaism. Khazaria was finally wiped out by the forces of Genghis Khan, but evidence indicates that the Khazars themselves migrated to Poland and formed the cradle of Western Jewry. The Khazars' sway extended from the Black Sea to the Caspian, from the Caucasus to the Volga, and they were instrumental in stopping the Muslim onslaught against Byzantium, the eastern jaw of the gigantic pincer movement that in the west swept across northern Africa and into Spain. So they were actually helping Europe not get invaded that much by Muslims or Arabs, because they were kind of in the way. To get to from Asia to Europe, you have to go through the Caucasus if you don't want to go through Africa and the Mediterranean. So yeah, they were holding that down, and they weren't letting nobody go by there. So they were kind of helping. They had an important role. All right. In the second part of this book, The Heritage, Mr. Koestler speculates about the ultimate fate of the Khazars and their impact on the racial composition and social heritage of modern Jewry. He produces a large body of meticulously detailed research in support of a theory that sounds all the more convincing for the restraint with which it is advanced. Yet, should this theory be confirmed, the term anti-Semitism would become void of meaning, since, as Mr. Koestler writes, it is based on a misapprehension shared by both the killers and their victims. The story of the Khazar Empire, as it slowly emerges from the past, begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated. Alright, y'all deep they're getting? Who are these Khazars today? Part 1. Rise and Fall of the Khazars. Says here, about the time when Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the West, the eastern confines of Europe, between the Caucasus and the Volga, were ruled by a Jewish state known as the Khazar Empire. Alright, so by the time of Charlemagne, this famous king, there was already a Jewish state known openly by everyone. The Khazar Empire was a Jewish state. Alright, during the time of Charlemagne. At the peak of its power from the 7th to the 10th centuries AD, it played a significant part in shaping the destinies of medieval and consequently of modern Europe. Alright, an important part. This Khazar Empire in modern Europe are a very important part in medieval and modern Europe. The Byzantine Emperor and historian Constantine Porphyrogenitus must have been well aware of this when he recorded in his treatise on court protocol that letters addressed to the Pope in Rome, and similarly those to Emperor of the West, had a gold seal worth 2 solidi attached to them, whereas messages to the King of the Khazars displayed a seal worth 3 solidi. It had more worth, they're saying. This was not flattery, but real politic. In the period with which we are concerned, wrote Bury, it is probable that the Khan of the Khazars was a little less important in view of the imperial foreign policy than Charles the Great and his successors. All right, so he had a very important role. He was respected just like Charles the Great. A few years later, probably AD 740, the king, his court, and the military ruling class embraced the Jewish faith. All right, this is it right here. How did they become Jews then in Hebrews? Kurimeo says that in the year 740, the Khazar Empire, the king, right, his court, the military ruling class, they all embraced the Jewish faith, and Judaism became the state religion of the Khazars. It became. No doubt their contemporaries were as astonished by this decision as modern scholars were when they came across the evidence in the Arab, Byzantine, Russian, and Hebrew sources. You understand? Modern scholars know this is a fact. It's in the Arab sources, right? The Byzantine sources, the Russian sources, and Hebrew sources. All right, classical antique sources. One of the most recent comments is to be found in a work by the Hungarian Marxist historian Dr. Antal Barta. His book on the Magyar society in the 8th and 9th centuries has several chapters on the Khazars, as during most of that period the Hungarians were ruled by them. Yet their conversion to Judaism is discussed in a single paragraph. With our investigations cannot go into problems pertaining to the history of ideas, but we must call the reader's attention to the matter of the Khazar kingdom state religion. It was the Jewish faith which became the official religion of the ruling strata of society. It became, needless to say, the acceptance of the Jewish faith as the state religion of an ethnically non-Jewish people or non-Hebrew people. Non-Hebrew, they're not the Hebrews, could be the subject of interesting speculations. We shall, however, confine ourselves to the remark that this official conversion is defiance of Christian proselytizing by Byzantium, the Muslim influence from the East, and in spite of the political pressure of these two powers, to a religion which had no support from any political power. but was persecuted by nearly all, has come as a surprise to all historians concerned with the Khazars and cannot be considered as accidental, but must be regarded as a sign of the independent policy pursued by that kingdom. Continues as which leaves us only slightly more bewildered than before. Yet whereas the sources differ in minor detail, the major facts are beyond dispute. Alright, so there's a fact. It's a fact that they converted, is what he's saying. What is in dispute though, what is they're disputing though, is the fate of the Jewish Khazars. What happened to these so-called Jewish Khazars after the destruction of their empire in the 12th or 13th century? On this problem, the sources are scant, but various late medieval Khazar settlements are mentioned in the Crimea, in the Ukraine, in Hungary, Poland, and Lithuania. Now, I believe that these countries have a large population of Jews, right? All right, so where's the Jewish Khazars? The general picture that emerges from these fragmentary pieces of information is that of a migration of Khazar tribes and communities into those regions of Eastern Europe, mainly Russia and Poland. Now it says here, where at the dawn of the modern age, the greatest concentrations of Jews were found. All right, so Russia and Poland. All right, they know the Khazar tribes ended up there, large communities of the Khazar, and that's actually where the largest concentrations of Jews are found in Europe, Russia and Poland. All right, this has led several historians to conjecture that a substantial part and perhaps the majority of Eastern Jews, the majority, remember the dude said 80% of the DNA, and hence of world Jewry, might be of Khazar and not Semitic origin. All right, the Eastern Jews. All right, and he let us know, remember before, that these are the same people that ended up founding the state of Israel, these Eastern Jews, who are actually might be more Khazar and not Semitic origin. They're not the Hebrews, not Semitic. The far-reaching implications of this hypothesis may explain the great caution exercised by historians in approaching this subject, if they do not avoid it altogether. And honestly, I have been avoiding it. Again, disclaimer, right? Fair use. Do what you want with the info. I'm just reading books. Don't kill the messenger. Thus, in the 1973 edition of the Encyclopedia Judaica, the article Khazars is signed by Dunlop, but there's a separate section dealing with the Khazar Jews after the fall of the kingdom, signed by the editors, and written with the obvious intent to avoid upsetting believers in the dogma of the chosen race. Now it says the Turkish-speaking Karaites, a fundamentalist Jewish sect. All right, who are these Turkish-speaking Karaites? We're talking about the ancient ones, not the ones that we believe they are. All right, of Crimea, Poland, and elsewhere have affirmed a connection with the Khazars, which is perhaps confirmed by evidence from folklore and anthropology as well as language. There seems to be a considerable amount of evidence attesting to the continued presence in Europe of descendants of the Khazars. How important in quantitative terms is that presence? All right, so how important, how big of a presence he's saying, right? He's quoting other people here, but then now the author saying of this article or book saying, so how quantitative, how big is this, how important is this presence of the Caucasian sons of Japhet? All right, let's go back. So you might not be you might actually be a Khazar. You might not be a Semitic origin. You're not Semitic. All right. So what are you then? Oh, okay. How important? Then that means that this presence of the sons of Japhet and the tents of Shem. What? Oh, he's going biblical now. Because remember the Bible, right? In the story of the Bible says that the descendants of Japhet will dwell in the tents of Shem and they will serve them. All right. So again, how important is in quantitative terms is the presence of the Caucasian sons of Japhet. Caucasian sons of Japhet. Remember the rabbi said we're Caucasian. Remember 80% European DNA in the tents of Shem. All right. Remember they're not Semitic origin. One of the most radical propounders of the hypothesis concerning the Khazars' origin of Jewry is the professor of medieval Jewish history at Tel Aviv University, A.N. Polyak. His book, Khazaria, in Hebrew, was published in 1944. in Tel Aviv, and a second edition in 1951. In his introduction, he writes the facts demand. All right, so source, primary source for them, right? He's a Jewish history professor at Tel Aviv University. He wrote a book, all right, saying a new approach both to the problem of the relations between the Khazar Jewry and other Jewish communities, and to the question of how far we can go in regarding this Khazar Jewry as the nucleus of the large Jewish settlement in Eastern Europe. All right, the descendants of this settlement, those who stayed where they were, those who emigrated to the United States and to other countries, and those who went to Israel, meaning the state of Israel, constitute now the large majority of world Jewry. All right, letting you know, this professor in 1944 book he wrote, right, that the Khazar Jewries, or these Jewish Khazars, right, basically either stayed there, all right, emigrated to the United States and other countries, and or went into Israel, and they are the large majority of world Jewry today. All right, they are the nucleus of this Jewish settlement in Europe, the Khazars. He's letting you know, this professor. This was written before the full extent of the Holocaust was known, but that does not alter the fact that the large majority of surviving Jews in the world is of Eastern European, and thus perhaps mainly of Khazar origin. If so, this would mean that their ancestors came not from the Jordan, but from the Volga, okay? Not from Canaan, not from America, but from the Caucasus, once believed to be the cradle of the Aryan race, and that genetically they are more closely related to the Hun. All right, the Hun. We're gonna see these people related to Mongols. They are related to Turks earlier, the Turkish-speaking Karaites. What's going on here? All right, is there a confederacy here? I smell a confederacy. All right, so they're mostly related to the Hun, Uyghur, and Magog tribes, then to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're not related. They're not descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Should this turn out to be the case, then the term anti-Semitism would become void of meaning, based on misapprehension shared by both the killers and their victims. The story of the Khazar Empire, as it slowly emerges from the past, begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated. Begins to look like the most cruel hoax which history has ever perpetrated. So before proceeding, I wanted to share this table right here, pretty detailed. Whoever made it, I found on the internet. All right, now again, from Genesis, which just means what? Birth or generations, descendancy, race. All right, so let me just zoom in. Of course, it starts off with Adam and Eve. All right, but let's get to the part we're talking about. Again, we're talking about the three sons of Noah, who are Ham, Japhet. We just talked about Japhet, so let's zoom into Japhet. All right, Asia Minor, Gomer, Gamiri, Cimmeri, the Cimmerians, Magog, Madai, Medes. All right, Tubal, Meshech, Tiras. All right, look, Rodanim, Kittim, Tarshish, Elisha, the Greeks, right? It tells you Ashkenaz, Ashkenazi. All right, the Hamites were Canaan, Phut, Mizraim, Egypt, Cush. All right, these Hamites, Amorites are in here too. As you can see, Philistines are in here too, Philistines. All right, let's not forget that. And then Shem, right? Now Shem had Elam. Remember, the Persians come out of Elam. Then he had Ashur. Ashur is the Assyrians, and he had other people. Now, Arphaxad or Arsharfat, something like that, is where Eber and Abraham come out of, right? Abraham right here, you see. So Eber, or where the Hebrews, right? The one who separated in the Tower of Babel, he who separated him and his family, or his son Peleg separated, right? They separated, those who separated. That's what Hebrew means, separated. All right, his line, this was after Ashur, after Elam. So these people right here are not Hebrews, even though they're from Shem. They're just Semites. All right, Arphaxad is a Semite. His descendants are Semites. But now after Eber, they're also Hebrew Semites, right? Hebrew Semites. All these people coming out of Eber, even Joktan, all these people right here are all Hebrew. These are all Hebrews, right? We got Abraham, then you got Isaac, right? You know the story, right? The story, and then Isaac had Jacob, right? Jacob had the 12 tribes for Israel. Now you get Israelites. So not everybody that's a Hebrew is an Israelite unless they're from Jacob, right? The sons of Jacob. He had 4 wives, remember. He had, Egyptian, Canaanite wives. He mixed too, all right?